too. Remember, library's closed tomorrow.
Yep.
And I have a thing you need to. You got to go to the library on Thursday to get your picture taken, or Wednesday, because you're in the yearbook.
Oh.
For most likely to cure disease.
Oh.
How's that walk for the traffic?
All right. I'll pick that up.
Yeah, no hurry.
He has a... Sounds good. Those Michael pants? It's pretty good quality. I'm like really contemplating getting a pair of like nice shorts because the pockets are like really good quality, like good zip. And the one, like I tried Michael's one and they're medium and they didn't so I'm like, so they look like they're like up here on him, so they're like just slightly longer on me. Because he roll, I think he rolls it too. But a smaller size like this. I'll show you. I didn't even count it. Because I wasn't like, and for my lifetime, like, all the ones that they are for my clips. So I got it. I put it back. But I'm not for the people that are going to do this because I don't have to go like this. I have no idea.
There's one tonight.
Some of those poor guys running. Oh my gosh, they were just, it was just a scope and stuff, and they were just like,
I have been there.
it takes a while to get
Mrs. Taylor sent it out to all the teachers, like, if there's anything you want to play, send it to Grace.
Oh, like that's what they say.
So like behind the community is doing something and there's a conservation.
You guys have a long report today?
No, just that. None of the teachers sent anything.
I'm just
Well,
here
I know
for
there's not really anything for track, it's just getting started.
Call meeting to order. Jenny, would you take the roll call?
Chris Freeman.
Here.
Mark Stillman.
Here.
Tanya Huseby. Here. Clint Moses.
Here.
Carl Palmer.
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson.
Here.
Charlie Schneider.
Here.
Angie Skillings. Here. David Steiner.
Here. We have a quorum to conduct business. The meeting has been properly noticed. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. School District of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens.
Next, we'll go to agenda order approval revision. Does anybody have anything tonight? One thing that I did want to talk to the board a little bit about is our discussion policy. Right now, we limit it to 2 minutes, or 2 times for 3 minutes for each agenda item. And wondering if the board wanted to continue that policy or if they want to open it up to free discussion. One thing I will say for the whoever will assume the chair in a couple, 3-4 meetings or whatever, it could be easier if you didn't have it. So less to keep track of and keeping time and all that good stuff. Anybody has interest in reverting it back to normal, I'd welcome a motion. If not, we'll continue as is.
I would make a motion to do that.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, Jenny, we'll just take a roll call vote, please.
Chris Freeman,
Yes.
Mark Hillman,
No.
Tanya Huseby. No. Clint Moses,
Yes.
Carl Palmer,
Yes.
Amy Riddle Swanson,
Yes.
Charlie Schneider,
No.
Angie Skillings,
Yes.
David Steyer.
Yes. Motion passes. So, I don't have to keep track anymore for the next 3 meetings. So thank you. So we will have open discussion. There's no limits. Back to the good old days. Okay, we'll move on. We don't have any recommendations, accommodations, other than congrats to the girls basketball team for going to state. First time ever, and also for the theater group, a wonderful production that they put on. Want to see it? Brian's son Sam was the main dude, so he liked to feed people to plants and get them stuff. Okay, at this time, I'd like to call on, yeah, there
Where
you
should
are.
I?
Come up, we got a seat right up here up
Oh,
front.
perfect. I didn't see that.
So, Grace, are you by yourself
I
today?
don't have my partner in front.
Okay.
He's getting EFT certified. So he's
Ooh.
in classes on Mondays.
Okay, so,
That means I'll be here alone from now on.
okay, so Grace Hosty is our student council rep, and she'll give you a student council report.
Hi, I'm Grace Hosty, student body president, and for my report today, I have some club announcements. The FBLA team went to an outstanding performance at the Region 1 Leadership Conference. It was held on February 5th at St. Croix Central. Over 450 students from 25 schools competed virtually and in person, and they earned first place and got the chapter community service, and all FBLA student competitors earned awards in their respective events. The Science Olympiad team took first place in their regional competition. 21 teams competed at regionals, and MHS's varsity team took first place overall and JV taking 8th. The teams competed in 28 events and took home 14 gold medals, 10 silver medals, and 10 bronze medals as well, and 6 fourth place medals. The next stop is state, which will take place on April 23rd at UW Stevens Point. We have some class announcements as well. The Science in the Community class is working on renewing our energy. So they're monitoring our e-gauge, auditing energy use in high school rooms, making recommendations for energy conservation, and educating themselves, peers, ooh, that just turned on, peers, and staff about electricity, generation use, and conservation. Their goal was 3%, and they shattered that goal. We did a day where we shut all the classroom doors and used the lights more, or we were more light aware. And I don't know what the actual goal we got was, but we beat 3%, so that's pretty awesome that we did that.
Dang.
The environmental bio class entered the annual Dunn County poster contest. Nora Sora, she's a foreign exchange student, she placed second, and Grace Frederick placed third at the county level. Both of these students will receive chamber bucks for their efforts. From the grants and programs section, the Rotary Club awarded Ellen Dingwall with $1,000 for a scholarship for her to go toward her mission of building a well through the Thirst Project. Ms. Ruckty has an update on our Cbtc Associate Degree Business Management Program. We are expanding it this year, and adding the addition of an associate degree business management program. This opportunity allows for students entering high school to earn a high school diploma and an associate degree at the same time. Our first cohort is planning on being 2024, and that's will be their second year, and they will be completing their 8th course in the degree program, earning approximately 24 credits by the end of the summer. We have 27 students that are interested in this program. So that'll be a new thing that's coming, and that's all I have for you today.
Very good.
Any
Is there any
questions
questions?
or anything?
Great. Very nice. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to community communications. We have a couple for tonight. Comments of the people of Menomonie, in the school district of Menomonie area are encouraged and appreciated by the board and administrators. Education is a partnership with the schools, parents, and taxpayers, all being important participants. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments to the board. This is a time to air concerns, express your opinions on issues. There should be no negative personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. Please indicate if you'd like the board president to direct a member of the administration to respond to your concerns. When you come to the mic, I'll have you come up and probably seat at the right-hand side there. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your municipality where you're from. First will be Josie Pillman. On deck will be Craig Nichols.
My name is Josie Pillman, and I'm from Knapp, and that is part of the Menomonie School District. Dr. Zajdowski, members of the Menomonie School Board. Besides COVID, we have another deceitful policy. It tries to tell us that education is about accepting what the culture calls fine and healthy. I'm speaking of the gender policy plan. Humans are born male or female. They will remain that way the rest of their life. Trying to change that will bring destruction. One kind of destruction it will bring is the destruction of the family. I will quote from the gender policy plan and follow with a layman's explanation. Quote, facilities. Schools may maintain separate restrooms, locker rooms, or changing facilities for male and female students. Access should be allowed based on the gender identity consistently expressed by the student. Any student who is uncomfortable using a shared restroom or locker room, regardless of the reason, shall upon request be provided with a safe alternative. This may include, for example, addition of a privacy partition or curtain, use of a nearby private restroom or office, or a separate changing schedule. However, staff shall not require or pressure any student/employee to use a separate, non-integrated space, unquote. What does this mean? No student can be forced to use the bathroom of their true sex. Meaning a little girl who thinks she is a boy cannot be forced to use the little girl's room, nor can a little boy who thinks he is a girl be forced to use the little boy's room. Ridiculous, unscientific, and immoral. So what has happened in the MHS? Some rather bold girls who want to imagine they are boys have been entering the boys' bathroom. Understandably, the boys are embarrassed to use the facility with girls present. When those boys have complained to the authorities, the teachers have been intimidated by this very policy and have been given special training to call such a complaint bullying, harassment, or discrimination. The boys have seen no action, rather have even experienced shame and mocking. Those girls are further emboldened. What recourse do the boys have? Without counsel and help, any student who tries to be who they are not, whether LGBT or Q, will have a guilty conscience and very often become suicidal. The normal students are sidelined and not allowed to speak the truth. They are gagged. This is wrong. Students and educators should be allowed to give wise moral counsel when they see others going astray, and to call it love, not bullying. Quote, student trips and overnight accommodations. When a school sponsors an activity that requires overnight accommodations, transgender and gender non-conforming students shall not be denied the right to participate. The district shall consider the goals of maximizing a transgender student's social integration and equal opportunities to participate in overnight activities and athletic trips, ensuring the student's safety and comfort and minimizing stigmatization of the student.
Thank you,
Accommodation will be made.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. At this time, I call Craig Olson.
Hello, everybody. You all right?
Yep.
First, excuse the casual attire. We just got out of track practice. I had 85 boys for the first day. And our girls' numbers are a little lower right now because a lot of them are in basketball, but we got about 45 sign up there. So I want to speak in favor of the sports complex, if you guys will give me a second here. I think anyone who's being honest will tell you that our goal in high school is to get kids to graduate. That's the number one goal. A boy who does not graduate from high school lives 6 years less than one who does, and earns about $800,000 less, adjusted for inflation, let's call it $2 million. So by getting that diploma, you get 6 years of life and $2 million of extra income. That's a big deal. We want kids to get diplomas, and anyone who's being honest will tell you that the best way to get kids a diploma is to get them involved. If we can get kids involved, we can get them through. Now, there are 3 ways to get kids involved. Number 1, you need good teachers and awesome advisors who will advise clubs and coach sports. We got a great staff. It's awesome staff at the high school. Number 2, you need opportunities. Every club you can imagine, anything, FFA, drama, sports, plays, musicals. And number 3, you need facilities. If you don't have these things, you won't have involvement. Now, I'm speaking in favor of the sports complex, which will provide excellent facilities for a huge number of athletes. 110 lower level football players, 140 kids in track, 30 girls soccer, 30 boys soccer, 60 cross country kids. That's over almost 400 athletes that are underserved right now by our facilities, right? We will have 60 events, like 10 boys, JV soccer, 10 varsity. 10 girls, JV, 10 varsity. 5 track meets, probably 15 football games between lower levels, 5, 6 track meets, plus middle school events, plus it'll be used every day for gym. That's huge bang for your buck. Now, we got $5 million or so sitting in a fund. It's not in the government's best interest to be hoarding dollars, especially when there's a need. If there's a need, and I hope you agree there is, we don't have the facilities Colfax has, then let's get this done. So please, support this sports complex with your vote today, and let's give some of these athletes who are underserved some awesome facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our communications. We move on to item 8, revenue and expense reports for the month ending February 2022.
Okay, we'll take a look at the revenue report first. For February 2022, a couple notes to here is we received the 4th special education aid payment. Also, we received the February tax collections that came in at about $7.97 million. Out of that, the Fund 10 portion was $4 million. So overall, for our General Fund 10 through February 2022, we've received in $16,993,278.99. For Fund 21, our gift donation account, we received $314,232.67. And then special education, we've received in so far $674,713.75. If we take a look at our expenditures, the expense by function report, for Fund 10, we're at 45.55% year to date. Compared to last year, we were at 46.04%. In Fund 27, we're at 52.32 compared to 49.34, so that's up slightly. And then Fund 50, we're at 53.27, which is down from last year. At the same time, we were at 54.77. And then if we take a look at our expenditures by object overall for the month ending February 2022, we're at 50.12% compared to last year of 59.23, and the year before that we were at 49.72. Just one note on the current month expenditures, we did make our debt service payment, so that's included in these figures.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Leah? Thank you very much. Move on to my item I, monthly employment report. is there for your viewing. Any questions on that?
I just wanted to make a comment. A gem of a parent is retiring, Patty Wolf, and so she was a huge asset to our family in Oak Lawn. So I just needed to note that. So I'm sure she's going to be greatly, greatly missed. But yeah.
Thanks, Tanya.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Angie, is there a second?
Second.
Amy? Consent agenda includes minutes from our special meeting of the electors on January 10th, 2022, regular board meeting of February 14th, 2022, financial reports that the board approved checks from all funds in the amount of $1,709,828.01, and cash receipts in the amount of $8,087,677.81 for the month of February 2022 as presented, and we had no donations exceeding $1,000. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Motion passes 8-0-1. Moving on to the personnel consent agenda, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Angie, is there a second?
Second.
Carl? Any discussion or questions? Seeing none? Jenny, let's vote. Motion passes by unanimous vote. 9-0. Moving on to the action agenda, item 4A, approve Cbtc shared services contract for 2022-2023. Is there a motion to approve?
I so moved.
Amy, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Angie? Anything, Dr. Zadowski?
No, both of these items would have typically been the consent agenda, but knowing that there's some board members that may want to abstain, we pull them separately. So these are just the services that we purchased through CISA 10 and 11 for next year. The first one here is CISA 10.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's vote. Motion passes 8-0 with one abstention. Item 4B, approve CISA 11 shared services contract for 2022-2023. Motion to approve.
I so moved.
Carl, second.
I'll second that.
Angie, any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Motion passes 8-0 to 1 with one abstention. Action item 4C, approve addition of the MHS Sports Complex project to the long-term capital improvement plan. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Angie, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mark, brain fart. Mark had the second. Okay, sorry about that.
Been called worse.
Yeah. Okay, any discussion? I think, our board did vote last meeting to bring this up for a motion on the action agenda item, so here it is. Any background, Dr. Zadowski?
I think this has been discussed pretty much as it can be, but I'll answer any questions if anybody has any.
Anybody? Seeing none? Chris?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I had some comments I thought might be instructive. The first thing I wanted to consider was the background document that Carl and Charlie had provided, and though I appreciate the work that you guys did, I'm very much concerned that a Facebook post would prompt you to make an addition to an agenda item for discussion, which wasn't really germane to our discussion. And I know we've had some comments before, and we had a policy that was regarding social media and our presence on there as being something we want to be mindful of. But in this case, the post didn't even reach out to our group. And instead of saying that you were responding to it, you actually trolled the person by giving a point-by-point refutation of commentary and language that I found to be demeaning to the person who made a Facebook post. We all have a right to our private lives and our posts without the school board giving them a smackdown, and have that be entered into our discussion to board docs. I hope we never do that again. I also did some checking to try and think about how we want to position our discussion in terms of community support of this facility, and I'm sure there's a lot of it. And I know that there were some references that Dr. Zadowski made to some emails that he received from some constituents, but I wanted to look into the best information we had regarding what our community felt about what our needs were as a district going forward, because we want to think about using those $5 million we have sitting in an account for things that the community suggested that were a priority for us. I went back to the listening session that structured our strategic plan and reviewed all the comments that were left by the community. And I'm sad to say that not a single community member said that we needed to have a $500,000 concession stand or a $2 million renovation to our facilities. In fact, most of the comments that came from the community said we had excellent facilities. So I just thought you guys should think about what evidence we have to support that comes directly from our community that's not filtered through other mechanisms. I also noted that the lowest score that we got in that feedback we got from our community was that we don't offer a variety of extracurricular and co-curricular experiences and clubs for students. That means that we don't have equity in terms of how we fund our extracurricular activities. And this came from our community, it came from our students, it came from our parents, and most tellingly it came from our employees. Those are our teachers that know best about how funding affects how we're supporting our students. And I'll note that after we just spent a significant amount of money on our renovation of our workout room, how much was that? Like $1 million? How much was it? How much was it?
You have 200,000 into it, Joe?
Hey, I don't have.
Maybe.
I bet that, but if you looked into whatever it was, I may be off on my figure. I thought it was a lot more than that. But when we look at that put in conjunction with this sports facility, we're going to be more inequitous than we ever have in our district's history. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so that's based on the feedback we got from parents and students and staff. Now, individuals of the board might have a different, group that gives them information. But the most unbiased information and feedback we got suggests that we've got a problem with equity in terms of supporting extracurricular activities, and this seems to heap some inequities on top of iniquities. When we look through the facilities and operations commentary that came from the community, they noted that our facilities were excellent. They were well kept, and I didn't see any commentary that suggested we needed any improvement on those. I did note that we had significant amounts of feedback saying that we need to have funding for the arts, but that's not really germane to this discussion. We need to think about equity in terms of supporting our extracurricular activities. Now, I appreciated that you guys put together a long document that looked at some of the history of the ways in which that this sports complex went forward. And I was wondering, Charlie and Carl, what document you were using to understand the bid that we got for $1.3 million for phase 3?
That was in the original document for the sports center, the business plan, if you will, for the sports center back 2015 or so.
Yeah, because I got that one in front of me. And when I went back and looked at that original document, I was sad to find that in that phase 3, that the proposal gave multiple items that were added to the basic phase 3 that Dr. Zagowski put forward as an all-in-one package. And when I suggested that we should figure out what are amenities and what are necessities in that bill, I would say that suggestion was met rather coolly. But I'll note that the athletic director, Bart Betcher, when he pitched the business plan, gave several options that were meant to be part of a discussion of the board to decide at what level they wanted to buy in. Did you want to ask a question? Okay. So the way in which this has been put forward to us seems to have made some decisions and created an agenda that were not part of the original plan. In addition, when you look at the ways in which that estimate was broken down, it seems that they've exaggerated the difference in cost between then and now. So when you look at the things that were meant to be additions to that basic sports complex, there are things that Dr. Zagowski put into the entire package. That to me is misleading. And it seems to me that we didn't get a proper historical understanding of what was all involved in this sports complex, its proposals and its phases, and I feel deliberately misled in addition to being disrespected. So I just wanted to add some of those items of information, and as a deliberative body that's supposed to be doing analysis based on evidence that we have before us, it seems that we haven't been provided with the correct evidence. It seems we've been misled in terms of what information was actually correct. It seems that there's been some misinformation regarding differences in price and costs. And it seems to me that the creation of an emergency sports complex at about $3 million that was proposed by Mark and is now being voted on today seems to be more than a rush to judgment. But given the fact that there's suddenly the amount of money that just happens to be available in Fund 46, I'm more than a bit suspicious about when and how this emergency funding for this particular sports complex emerged right now. So those are some of my concerns. And I hope that at least if you don't agree with my view on whether or not we should fund this entire package right now, that at least you can take a little moment to think a little more deeply about what the community has stated about how they see iniquities in our extracurriculars, also ways in which we see how they wanted to give us direction, how we spent our money, and also some problems that are involved in this process that are very concerning and deeply troubling.
Angie?
I guess I would just like to add that what went on in 2015 is 7 years ago. It is now 2022 is a complete different board. And our board has asked for some of these things. Costs have gone up, things have changed in 7 years. And so you can't hardly pull a survey from, I don't know when you're looking at that, when that survey was, and try to equate it to what our board is doing now. And I personally would like to call the question. I think that we've heard enough. It's just more of the same. We've had this discussion for 8 weeks now, this is our 4th meeting. And
That was all new information.
Question has been called. Is there any objection to the question being called? Any objection? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. Motion passes by a 7-2 vote. Okay, move on to the discussion portion of our agenda. First is the clerk's report of the results of the 2022 primary school board election.
All right, thank you, Dave. Well, we'll start out. The Board of Canvassers met on February 18th at, what time was it? 2022 in the boardroom at the Administrative Services Center at 2015 Pine Avenue. The meeting was called to order by Deputy Board Clerk Jenny Mikesell at 12:36 p.m. Other boards of canvassers present were Clint Moses and Lisa Kais. Also in attendance were Abe Smith, Dominic Stewart, and James Stewart. Mikesell administered the oath of office for members of the Board of Canvassers. Mikesell reported that a public notice of the meeting of the Board of Canvassers was duly posted in public locations as well as online and on social media. Item B, canvass of primary election returns of the February 15th, 2022 election. The board reviewed and compared tally sheets from Optech edge tapes from the 15 municipalities that comprise the school district of the Menomonie area, which includes the 11 wards in the city of Menomonie. The Board of Canvassers for the school district of Menomonie area determined that candidates Abe Smith, Jennifer Sackery, Brittany Weicker, Dominic Stewart, Rachel Henderson, and Scott Parker had been duly elected to be placed on the spring election of the April 5th, 2022 election, with vote totals as follows. Smith, 1,190, Sackery, 574, Weicker, 610, Stewart, 1198, Henderson, 1224, and Parker, 634. The school board election results were certified by the Board of Canvassers, and we adjourned at 1:55 p.m. I'll also note that we found absolutely no errors in any of the wards or any of the tallies, so that was very, very positive. We have had some contentious and close ones over the years, so I was glad that this was not one of those. So we adjourned at 1:55, and then we reconvened at 2 o'clock, same location, same people were present for the drawing of lots for the spring election, so to determine the order of the election. So the ballot order for the spring election is as follows. Number 1, Dominic Stewart. Number 2 is Abraham Smith. Number 3 is Scott Parker. 4 is Rachel Henderson. 4 is Jennifer Sackery, and 6 is Brittany Weiger. So with that, that's the report, Mr. President.
I think you meant 5 was Jen Zachary, right?
Oh, did I say?
You said 4 twice.
Skipped over.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Any questions? Okay, very good. Move on to item 5B, results of the due process complaint. Dr. Zadowski?
Just wanted to announce to the board that we did receive the results of a due process hearing that we had in the school district. On March 1st, the district was pleased to learn that the administrative law judge in that matter ruled in favor of the district on all issues. The judge determined that the previous agreement had resolved the parents' claims that the district had denied the student a free appropriate public education from September 1st to January 10th. The student's current IEP is reasonably calculated to provide her with free appropriate education, and the district has not failed to provide the student with a free appropriate education by not implementing in her school district specific COVID-19 mitigation measures that were requested by the parents, and the district did not commit any procedural violations that resulted in or constituted a denial of a free appropriate education. So with that being said, I wanted to congratulate Mrs. Kowalski, our Director of Special Education, also our teachers, our principals, and everyone in the district who really had to deal with some stress and working through this, but everyone did a good job and it was recognized by the administrative law judge, so thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any more other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 5C, review 2022-2023 Menomonie High School course recommendations.
So Dave, I think Mr. Drake and Mr. Segwin, so Casey, if you want to come up maybe next to Sam in case there's questions, but this is part of the process that the board sees every year. At the high school, the students fill out their request forms for which classes they want, and then the administrative team, Mr. Segwin, and then the principals at the high school get together, and then they work with the school counselors and they try to divvy up all the different classes that the students want, and from there they develop a list. So Brian, that's just a little introduction. Why don't you and Casey take it from there?
Yep. So Joe did a nice job of introducing this. Pretty procedural, and I would say very much in line with most years what we'll see as far as a handful of courses, typically upper level courses that are coming forward this evening. Mr. Drake, I don't know if you have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. I would agree with Brian that it's typical to have some classes that we're requesting that we'd like to run under 15 student requests, and then we have some courses each year that we will be unable to run. Most of those courses are courses that have less than 15 requests. There are a couple that have just a few more than 15.
I guess one thing to add this year that was added in the process, and Principal Drake did a nice job with his team at the high school of reaching out to individual students as well as their families for students who had signed up for courses that were slated to be recommended not to run, to invite them in to either meet with a counselor or look for some other options should they want to. As part of the registration process, students do select alternates in the event that there is a course that doesn't run but also a scheduling conflict. But based off of discussion with this process last year, we did layer that process in. Also, that takes that notification happened ahead of the deadline for students to sign up for the early college credit or Start College Now programs as well. So that was a new step in the process this year. Is there any questions?
That was my question. However, no.
Other questions for Clint?
Yeah, I feel like I ask you this every year, Brian. Do you look and see so that we're not year after year not offering the same courses that have some high numbers? And I target like obviously agriculture because we only have one ag teacher in our district, and technology education because in my opinion there's such a diversity of field studies there. But you've got some kind of high numbers: architectural engineering, automotive systems, engineering, design, all the technologies actually, except for one. There's a lot of kids that want to take that. Do we look and see so that we're not denying those 2 years in a row? So if you've got a kid that's like maybe they can't get it their junior year, but they can swing back and catch it their senior year?
Yeah, actually, Mr. Drake and I've had some conversation around that, and I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So if you look at like engineering design and architectural engineering, both those classes have a pretty good chunk of kids that wanted to request that this year, or did request it this year. Both those classes have run recently in the past couple of years. And, so this year, not having both of them run, this coming year, not having both of them run is kind of a hit, but knowing that we've had them run in the past and that we can gather some of these underclassmen who did request it for this coming year into the year after that, I think will be good. We do intentionally run some classes every other year, on purpose, so that we plan that way. These aren't necessarily that. We've done that in the past where we kind of transition when we see classes that are starting to not run every year. We'll intentionally say, okay, they're going to run in the even years or the odd years, whatever it is. And then kids can kind of plan around that when they're going through with that. So that might be something to look at for those engineering courses specifically. If we look at the automotive systems class, we do have a third automotive class that will run. It's got 2 sections. It would be what I would consider more of a beginning level automotives class. So we still are offering some automotives, but not as much as we'd certainly like to. We'd love to be able to, although we can't, we'd love to be able to have all the courses that students request to be able to run.
When you answered my question, I mean, for the most part, I was hoping that there was some type of an awareness as far as what we're offering. If the trend is that 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row, we continue not to offer it, maybe we need to pull that course completely.
Yeah, I would agree, and especially if we're seeing lower numbers in there, they don't have student requests. But even if we have higher classes numbers or student request numbers, yeah, I would agree that maybe that's time that we just can't offer for whatever reason, or look at finding a different plan with it too. So we certainly do take a lot of time, and technology and agriculture are the 2 that I've seen in a couple of years here too, that have a couple courses that don't run every year that have okay numbers with it.
Amy?
I have the exact same question, and I actually emailed Mr. ahead of time because he likes to get emails ahead of time of board meetings. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I think you said something about staffing too, might be an issue for those classes.
Well, yeah, the plan put together is based on current staffing. So there are some years when staffing levels would allow for more or less classes to be run. The departments we're talking about there probably hasn't changed as significantly as some other departments. More in the core areas, sometimes I think you can see greater fluctuation. But yeah, that is based on our current staffing.
Thank you.
I think another thing to point out in the next agenda item, well, we're not there yet, we're talking about course options. If you look at that list, not all the courses that we're talking about, but there are courses that our students can take other places as well, and some people do take advantage of that. So I think that even though it's a separate item, it goes into some of the thinking behind this.
Any other questions for Brian and Casey? Okay, thank you both. We'll move on to item 5D. Joe, is it cold in here? People have their hats on, they got blankets on their laps. Are we saving money? Is that the deal here?
You guys cold?
Council's running a program.
Oh, is okay, I just look out and I see all the cool.
It's not cold over here.
I know my hands are cold. Okay, item B. Review early college credit program requests for the fall of 2022.
All right, again, this is a pretty standard agenda item, comes in twice a year, once here in the spring, I'm going to call it spring, and then once in the fall. As you can see, looking ahead to both summer and fall, we include those requests. These would be for summer and fall. These are courses that students are requesting to take either at UW Stout or another institute of higher education, locally that'd be Stout or Cbtc. You can see that our numbers are, I'll say, somewhat in line with where they were last year as far as the number of requests that we have by the total number of students. And just as a reminder with this piece, students are allowed to take up to 2 courses, through this process. In many cases, we will have a number of students that will request many more than those 2 because it's based on availability at the time of registration either CBTC or Stout, and our students will be the last ones to register in that process. So a lot of times they'll request several courses and then based off of what's available at the time, and go from that process. So as we look through that list, a lot of similar type courses that we see students requesting, informational at this point in time for you. But if there are any questions, happy to answer.
Any questions by the board? Okay, very good. Thanks, Brian. Move on to item 5E, review 2022-23 early budget.
So Leah will take most of this, but I want to point out that the timeline that we have for the board is the same timeline that we've used for a number of years now, and it's been a good process for our budgeting. I do want to caution everyone that this is a very early estimate, and there's so much information that we won't know, but that's kind of the speech that we always talk about this time of year. But we still need to move forward in terms of planning, and I think that's what Leah's done. Leah, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about what's in the first budget estimate for next year.
Sure. Like Joe mentioned, this is just the starting point for building next year's budget. And so there are a lot of decisions yet that aren't known, but we have to make assumptions at this point. For example, the staffing plan hasn't been set yet. The increase in salaries and benefits haven't been set yet, and insurance renewals, etc. All those things we don't know yet. And so in the 22-23 budget estimate report to the board, up on the top, I listed all of the assumptions that are built into this early estimate. And then also, as you go down and look at all the different line items, like estimated salary and benefit increases, to the right of that, I put what I put in there for the estimate. So for example, Fund 10 salaries and benefits at 4.7%, health and dental 3%, and so on. And so as we go through the spring, I will revise all of these amounts and build in what either the board approves or what the insurance renewals come in at, all those things. And then in May, we'll bring another preliminary budget estimate to the board for discussion, and then look for approval of that in June.
Now, this being the second year of the biennium coming up does make this an easier year to set the budget than other years when we're waiting on Madison to give us direction. Unfortunately, what we know from Madison is that we're not getting any new money. No per pupil increase in aid, no revenue cap adjustment. So it's all being put essentially on the COVID relief funding. The good news is that our district did receive a large amount of COVID relief funding, and we've been very cautious with how we've allocated those funds. So when you look at the initial estimate, we're probably looking at around $360,000 less in revenue and around $1.2 million more in expenses. So there's a gap there of about $1.6 million as we're looking into the 2022-2023 budget. But that's not a surprise. When there's a loss of revenue, we know that expenses are going to go up. They may be going up a little more rapidly now than they typically would because of inflation. But we have anticipated this. We have earmarked funds in our COVID relief, and I fully expect that we'll be able to bring this budget in by the time it's all said and done. Any questions or comments?
Amy?
I have a question about ESSER funds. So we're $1,260,803. That's an expected increase, but right now we're low because we haven't gotten those ESSER funds yet. Is that what you're trying to say?
We have not allocated all ESSER funding yet.
But we actually have that in our that $1,260,803 somewhere in our coffers.
I don't know if I'd say they're in our coffers, but we have been allocated those amounts that we can apply for.
Okay. And what exactly can ESSER funds be? Is there like a list or place you can go to look to see what ESSER funds can be?
Sure. We reported to the board a couple different times, Amy, so if you go back in board docs, you can read all about it. We also talked about it at the mid-year budget hearing. But the different parts of ESSER have different stipulations. ESSER 3, the largest portion, there is a certain amount that has to be, 20% has to be set aside for evidence-based learning activities, learning recovery, which we'll have no problem meeting that with all of our summer school expenses and other programming. But we will be able to use ESSER to close this gap, I think is what your question is.
Yes, that would be my question for sure. And then, has ESSER 3 been funded yet? From what I understand, the legislature is still caught up in the legislature, is that correct?
The deadline for submitting the application is Friday.
Okay.
But Brian and Leah and our whole team, in fact, the directors, every single Monday we talk about it, and that was one of the topics of today's meeting, and we're all set to go.
Okay. And then my other question is, would it be possible that the ESSER funds could pay for the technology that is now in the 30-year maintenance plan?
Partially, yes, and that's one of the options we're looking at. The challenge, though, is, like I said, we're expected to use ESSER funds to operate next year. So we need to be cautious not to use ESSER funding for projects that would allow us not to have operating funds. So we're still balancing that out, but Amy, yes, that is one of the things we've talked about. We know we have some significant expenses coming up with classroom technology, not only displays, but also devices for our students and staff. So we're trying to balance all of that between the ESSER funding and making sure that we have enough for operations. And there's been a lot of talk about the next biennium at the state level potentially being difficult. I'm hopeful that public schools will see an increase, especially with the surpluses that are being talked about in Madison, but we know that there's a long list of items that will be considered for that budget.
Okay. And the reason I said that was because I thought that might offset some of the debt that we might be incurring in 10 to 12 years on the maintenance plan. I mean, not the debt, but the
Shortfall.
Yeah, shortfall when we go in the red.
One of the things that I'd like to see is, right now we're at 810,000 on Fund 46. Every year going into that fund. With the addition of the technology piece, and as of our vote tonight here with the sports complex, I guess I'd be in favor of raising that up a little bit to 1 to 1.1 million, somewhere in there a year. I'd stretch that out a long ways as far as that shortfall. Amy?
That's interesting because the person that wrote the email that Charlie and Carl responded to, that was her idea. She thought $250,000 more, but for an inflationary increase would be good to keep us out of the red.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And spending money out of their money has to go back in. And so I think what you're alluding to is there ways we can use the ESSER money so that monies may potentially be left that could be diverted into Fund 46 at the end of the day, which may be a year or two out yet. Because if we don't do it right now, some of that can't go into Fund 46.
And we didn't dispute that point.
Right, yeah. I guess my perspective on it is I don't think that we have to fully fund. Fund 46 has been fully funded up until this year. When we add the technology piece into it, that really set us back in Fund 46. With the addition of the sports complex to it as well, I think that it makes sense to increase that funding. But I would defer to Leah and Joe and the team.
One thing to keep in mind is that once dollars are put into Fund 46, they can only be used for Fund 46 items. And we have never seen school finance turn upside down as much as it has the last 2 years. Now, Act 10 and all that was a whole different story, but until we see what the state's going to do in terms of dealing with this, what could be considered a fiscal cliff, depending on how it's handled in Madison, I think it'll be handled well. But with so much revenue being replaced with federal COVID money, I mean, there's going to have to be a huge commitment from Madison just to get us back to where we would be. So I would caution the board a little bit about putting money into the trust fund with the limited spending abilities of that fund when we don't know what the next biennial budget would be. I do think that in the event that we have more revenue than expenses at the end of any given year, I absolutely think that the trust fund, the Fund 46, is a perfect parking spot for that. I would just be careful to adjust too much on the front end. I think what Dave's talking about and what Margaret Bryce had suggested, I think that's a reasonable figure, but I wouldn't get overly caught up in trying to balance Fund 46 30 years out. It actually was just this last year where we finally had Fund 46 balanced, but I think that was more of a product of COVID and us not adding to the plan. You know, it's a living document that every year we've been adding to, so it's no surprise that it goes into the red 30 years down the line. I was looking at it today, I think like the high school parking lot was in there like 2 or 3 times for a couple $1 million when you add that stuff up. The district video system, all of the security cameras is in there like 6 times. So there's a schedule for all the boilers, all the roofs, everything in there. And some of it will be replaced on time, some of it will be replaced with a different solution. It's a great planning document, but it's not meant to be weaponized like it has been by some people.
Do you have any idea, Joel, the technology piece, what that amounts to in Fund 46?
I want to say it was around $2.5 million, but I don't have the figure right in front of me. It was significant.
Any other questions for discussion? Clint?
We'll talk. I think Dr. Joe kind of touched on it a little bit, but I like David brought it up, and Amy did as well. The Fund 46, I believe that we should be funding a little bit more, but as Joe said, we want to be very careful and wait and see kind of how the next biennium shapes up. So I'd wait till the end, basically the last minute, like we've done in years past. Leah, this is an excellent document. The assumptions, I mean, it's very hard to tell what's going on right now. I am confident that this will be handled appropriately in Madison. I have no doubt in my colleagues on JFC that it's going to be done well. I have no doubt that administrators are still...
Mark the tape.
Yeah. Mark this part too. I have no doubt that administrators will still call and complain. I will tell you
Mark the tape.
That my experience, and Joe cautioned us a little bit on this, I have seen other districts where they've started to try and backfill and use money that was set aside for projects. They're going to be in really tough shape. I'm confident that we'll be okay as long as we don't go spending money that's set aside for ESSER, because, yeah, part of the backfill plan that Joint Finance had was to take ESSER money and in lieu of some of the per capita money, basically, that's normally out there, or per pupil money that's out there. So I'm not worried. The sky is not falling. We'll be just fine.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, thank you, Leah. Joe, appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to item F, discuss SBMA employee compensation for 2022-2023.
Well, talk about spending money. This is going to be the most expensive package that we've looked at in the past decade in the school district. But like we all agree, having a terrific staff is probably the single greatest thing we can do to impact the educational program that we have in our schools. But like other entities, like going to the grocery store and buying your groceries, like going to the gas pump and filling up your car, things have gotten very expensive. Now, the consumer price index that's used, the average CPI for looking at base wages for schools is at 4.70. That's way higher than what we've seen. That equates to over $1 million in new compensation expenses for our current SDMA staff for next school year. The district is not bound by that CPI, but it has been the measure that we've used when considering preliminary budget, when determining employee compensation increases for the past several years. Now, I do think it's important to understand that our district has done a good job of maintaining the integrity of our pay scales and our wage systems. Since 2010, the school district has eclipsed the CPI by almost 2%, 1.88%. And that doesn't even include the longevity, summer school incentives, and other pay scale adjustments that we've done. So I think we've done a good job staying competitive even in times when the CPI was lower. The past 2 years alone, we've exceeded the CPI by 0.77%. And I do know that when we had this discussion last year, it was mentioned here at the board level, thinking that it was very possible that CPI could go up is something the board needs to consider moving forward. If the board was to look at that 0.77% that the board paid above CPI in the last 2 years, That would take this year's CPI down to 3.93%, which would be a total of about $853,000. So it's, around $160,000, $170,000 difference if the board felt the need to consider that additional payment that had been made in the past 2 years. I would caution the board to do that though, for a couple reasons. One, I think 4.7 is actually low compared to what people are experiencing. I think if you were just to take the last 6 months or the last 4 months as compared to the past 12, I think it's going to be much higher than 4.7. I also know what kind of environment it's been for everyone in our schools and certainly in our community, in other work organizations as well, but it's been difficult. So I think the board should consider all of that. We did put together pay plans based on the 4.7 and based on the 3.93. We are suggesting that the board continue the longevity incentives. It was a 5-year trial period. I can't believe that 5 years is up already, but they're not super expensive. It's about $20,000 a year total across the whole district. I would recommend that we make those incentives permanent. And other than that, I guess we're looking for direction from the board in terms of how you want us to move forward in developing the recommendation for you to consider next time we meet.
Okay, discussion.
I believe our teachers deserve everything we can give them. 4.7% would be would be what I would like to see.
I appreciate that, Amy. Just for a point of clarification though, we're talking about compensation for everybody in the district. Our teachers, our paras, our custodians, our administrators, everybody.
Okay, well, I don't mean to say just teachers, but staff.
Okay, so you're saying 4.7 for everybody?
I mean, everyone knows we're going through crazy times as far as CPI and stuff, but if you look at historically, you look back at our CPI since 2010, I mean, the highest previous to this was 3.16, excuse me. I guess the big question I've had is what can we afford? That's something I'm going to rely obviously from Leah to figure out, or you, Joe, as far as what we can do for increases, because we're seeing in the private sector, obviously, where it's hard to even compete, find people right now, retain them. So I guess my first part is relying on you guys for information. 2, when are we expected to come back and vote on this? Next meeting?
Well, we do need to bring it back. I mean, we don't meet again now until March 28th. We do need to bring this back so that we can then get all of our contracts issued, all of our letters of assignment issued. So I would say, yeah, we need some direction so that we can develop. I would say March 28th would be a good landing point for that. April, is it 11th?
Yes.
April 11th, the absolute latest, Clint.
Other discussion?
Well, I'm with Clint. Once we see how the numbers shake out with a little more information, I also agree with Amy. This is the year that we need to treat our teachers well, if there ever was one, this next contract.
Carl, what did you mean by numbers shaking out and more information? Because I think we have everything you would need.
Just as we get closer, I'm assuming there will be a little more detail to the numbers, or not?
Not. I mean,
Okay.
it's we have the 4.7 in the preliminary budget. We know it's going to cost $1,021,121. We have the pay scales in there.
Okay.
I guess I'm not sure what other information you might be looking for. In terms of can we afford it? I mean, it's expensive. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But it's like everything else. I don't know if you can afford not to do it. Because it is. It's harder and harder to find not only teachers, but paraeducators, custodians, all the way down the line. And I mean, we know how important our people are. Will this lead to cuts in the future? Yeah, it probably will. I mean, at some point, things are going to have to shake out. So unless funding is really going to come from Madison, this probably will accelerate the timing at what point some reductions will have to be made. I can't imagine that we're going to go a whole decade without having some reductions at some point. But I also know that we're facing a pretty stiff task right now in putting together a terrific staff for next year.
When is the last time that the district had to do reductions? I don't know any history on that.
2011. After 10.
Well, we definitely had reductions right after Act 10. I do think there was some other rearrangements that happened. And that's one thing, even if we get some new money from the state, when you look at having to implement new programming or emphasize different things, consider projects, whatever they may be, we have to continue to reallocate our resources. And that's one thing that I think is, really one of the biggest goals and tasks that I have as a superintendent, but also as the board, is to align our resources with the expectations and needs of our community. The challenge, the real difficult piece of that is that one, our resources, we don't necessarily know what they're always going to be, and then two, the needs and expectations of our community change. And that's why we do strategic planning, that's why we have these meetings, that's why we communicate with people the way that we do, is we're always trying to get feedback and put together our proposals based on what the needs and expectations are.
And just for clarification too, we talk about one-time money, like the sports complex is one-time money. Salaries are something that's done every year, so this increase will be every year. I would support the 4.7% myself. Does this include substitute teachers in that when we went through that too?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I would just clarify that if this is the information we're dealing with, I support 4.7.
Amy?
My question is, I think in here it might say, but I can't find it at this point, but is the insurance going to stay the same, or is that going to be going up?
I do have it in the narrative there that we do.
3%?
Well, no, we right now we have a 0% increase in terms of our premiums. That was renewed in January. We're hopeful that we'll go through the rest of 2022 without an increase in premiums. But again, we have to continue to watch our health insurance. We saw a definite increase towards the end of 2021, but now we're watching the first few months here of 2022 to see if that was a trend or if it was just a little bit of a blip. So I'm hopeful that we'll have no increase. In the preliminary budget, we did plan for a 3% increase in the event that we do have to increase it during the next fiscal year. But pretty much every year we plan for a 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Is it true, Joe, that we still have a decent fund balance, but that did decrease some this year?
You're talking about the self-insured health insurance fund?
Yeah.
Yeah, we still have a very healthy balance in there. It was a planned spend down. Not that we ever want to have medical costs, but we didn't feel the need to increase premiums when our fund balance was sitting at such a sustainable level. But we'll continue to watch for that as we move forward.
Other questions? Chris?
Yeah, this is more just of a comment. I really appreciate that you're trying to find a way that you can give a lot of people who are struggling right now a means by which that they can, just manage the cost of living that has been hitting all of us. But I would also caution that by giving a 5% raise to people at the top of the pay scale, who also have their salaries linked to other mechanisms, like finding equity amongst other administrative positions and comparables, which recently we just did with our administrative staff, that finding two levels by which we adjust their income levels seems to be unfair and a little bit unethical. So I would caution everyone that a 5% increase for someone who makes $150,000 looks different than someone who makes $50,000. And they're also getting increases based on comparable adjustments that we have just gone through. So I would like to see us taking a little bit more of a measured approach in terms of how, because I know maybe if I was making 50 and I saw some other people get raises to make them comparable with other administrative pay scales, and then they get another 5% on top of that, that would maybe not sit well with me.
Any other discussion? Okay, is there a general consensus of the board to bring it back at 4.7 across the board?
I would make a motion if I have to bring that back at 4.7 for the next meeting.
Would you like a motion, Joe, or are you okay?
I think that makes sense. Procedural.
Procedural, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Amy? Yeah, we'll just do a voice vote on this. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that'll come back at our next meeting, March 28th. So, for approval. Okay, we'll move down to item G, discuss 2022 summer school incentive.
I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but we had a summer school incentive last year because of the difficulty in finding summer school staffing. Unfortunately, COVID made this year extremely difficult as well, so we are again suggesting a summer school staffing incentive. Any questions or concerns? Hearing none, we'll plan to bring this back for you at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Item H, review policy 850, advertising and promotion on school premises. I'll defer to Tanya on this.
Well, as a group, we approved the streamlining, so it only seemed to make sense to go back and visit the advertising and promotion, because there's a lot of talk about political ads and religious ads. So that's why I asked to have it on, for everybody to take a review. If you're all good, then great, but then we at least reviewed it and updated it like it should be, I guess.
Was there anything that you saw, Tanya, that you thought should be changed?
We just had a lot of conversation about political and religious ads not being included, and I don't believe either is called out in the policy. So as a group, did you want to add those things, or are we going to wait until there's a problem and then add it, or?
I would be okay with leaving it up to the district administrator, just because we do have like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and we have things like that. Not that they would ever advertise on our live stream, but I mean, there are situations in which something with a religious connotation would, you know, maybe possibly potentially be advertised, but I don't think they do. But I think it should be up to Joe, his discretion.
And then the only other thing, it would be interesting to have a yearly report back of those that were declined and received, so that at least the board is aware of who's being advertised. Also can also support them in the community, so I don't know if that can be added for a yearly report.
Well, I guess my question is there a process where Joe or a designee certainly is reviewing, you know, what a contracted like live stream is going to be doing? Or is it just a spot check, right, which is different than oversight? It's like once in a while we'll look, you know what I mean? Is there a process for reviewing? You're probably looking at the signs in the gym, you know, those sort of things on a regular basis, but the streaming's a little different.
Well, like it says in our policy, annually the administrators at the close of each school year have to submit to the district administrator a summary of all equipment and materials containing advertising of a service, product, or activity at the respective educational sites in their areas. And then these summaries are submitted to the Board of Education for review. I think you usually see those in July, maybe August.
I recall getting a report of all the advertisers. I guess, I don't know if there's ever been any that have been denied, but I think that's what Tanya's asking too. It'd be kind of nice to know if there was any that were turned away. And then another concern I had, and this ties into the other policy as well, is I was under the impression that we were revisiting these policies more often. This one last was visited on April 14th of 2003. So it seems like that's maybe overdue. I thought we cycled through them every 3 years or something like that.
Well, we have a lot of policies, so we don't go through all of them. You know, I mean, I think they kind of hit the ones that need to be done.
Well, I think sometimes, Clint, too, just because something's reviewed doesn't mean that it's revised. You know, sometimes they'll have a reviewed date on there. This one was revised in 2003. I know it's been reviewed since then. I guess one suggestion I would have, and we always get this question, in fact, I just got it from the streaming company this last week. What about an institution that, you know, serves alcoholic drinks, but also serves food? What do we, it seems to be more of that kind of business out there. Right now, it's pretty tricky with the policy because it says that no branded resources or materials offered by tobacco or alcohol manufacturers. That's pretty easy. wholesalers or retailers whose primary business, as defined by licensure provisions, is the sale of alcohol or tobacco, may be accepted by a school or its affiliate. I guess I like the first sentence where we talk about we're not having alcohol or tobacco images on the advertisements, but I guess I don't necessarily see a problem. I don't want to really pick out any particular place, but I mean, think of your favorite downtown place where you might go get a fish fry or you might go get a drink or whatever. I mean, long as they don't have a picture of a beer or, you know, something like that, I guess I don't see that to be harmful. But I don't know if the board would like to ease that restriction a little bit or not.
Thoughts? Charlie?
I would agree and maybe even go farther to including the wholesalers, as long as, again, they're not advertising an alcoholic beverage or something like that. There's some wholesalers in the area that are very good to the district with buying advertising and so forth, and I would hate to leave them out of that process. As long as their ads are reviewed and somebody's saying, you know, they're okay. I think that it makes sense to update and change this policy to reflect that.
So should I maybe draft up a little bit of a suggested modification and bring that back at the next meeting?
That'd be great.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. We'll bring it back. Chris?
I just want to get this straight. So Tanya, you put forward this to be added to our discussion item. I get that. And then we asked for any feedback on that. There's no feedback. And then Joe made a discussion, an addition to what he'd like to see happen. And then people agree with that. And then now we're going to go ahead and you're going to rewrite that. And then we're going to look at that again in the next meeting. Is that right? Okay. It just seems a little odd that the administrator is actually developing at that.
You're a board member, Chris, if you want to make suggestions.
Well, no, I'm making a commentary. I think you understand what I'm saying. We often have this situation where the person that's usually meant to be an advisory function is actively participating in meetings and developing policy. In this case, he made the suggestions on how he wanted the policy revised. He got Charlie then said, yes, I agree with that. And then he said, I'll write this up. And everyone said, great. That's just not normal. I mean, it kind of is more normal for us, but I find that to be a little bit problematic.
We have a very good administrator.
Can I add just a little bit?
Sure.
There was some other suggestions that were brought up as well. I think Carol had a couple, Tony had some. I would like to see something as far as the process when it's in question, because the way the policy is written now is the principal makes a decision. Well, I don't think it's fair to put it on our principals to make the final decision. So some way it needs to be addressed a little bit more on what you come back with as far as what the process is. And I think part of that is making sure the board knows who is maybe denied and for what cause. So it's not falling just on one person's shoulders to make that decision.
Just to kind of piggyback off that, Clint, if somebody is denied, there's got to be a way that we can revise that to make it so they're maybe not denied, right?
They could appeal it or something, or if there's...
Or just change something, yeah, for sure. So, and I don't know, I think it's I think that administrators should have the right to have an idea. So, whether we agree with it or not, it happened.
The board still makes the decisions. Any other discussion?
Can we triple check though that it's on that yearly report sheet that
Sure.
Brian shares, or somebody shares, sorry, at the beginning of the year, it's that nice calendar. It has
Our
all-
calendar of board reports.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Moving on to item I, discuss SDMA curriculum opt-out procedures. Tanya.
Well, this was actually, I thought of after our last meeting, because this whole opt-out verbiage was kicked out, and so I talked some with Joe, shared with me all three places that it was, and it's all the same terminology, which is awesome. My concern was that it's very laid out of what the teacher's going to do once it, in the event that a student is excused, these are all the steps. But it seems to be missing like what steps the parent does. So a request for an alternate learning activity. Well, does that request come from a phone call or an email? I just felt like we should have more of a process for a parent to be able to follow of what they need to do. Could we also include it out on underneath the district info, curriculum and instruction? There's actually a forms tab out there. Can we put it handy so that families know where to find it, to how to address it if they do have a concern? So yeah, so this is just coming back from last time's conversation. I didn't feel like we were done from, I think it was your agenda item on Valentine's Day, of having answers. So that's what I would like to discuss, to see. If anybody else had time to review it, input.
The only thing I saw was the 2 opt-out procedures at the middle school and high school, maybe change the heading on that a little bit.
Oh, so it's clear defined. Makes sense.
Elementary, it's labeled opt-out, but not the middle school and high school.
Operationally, I'd be a little bit concerned with prescribing the process too much. And what I mean by that is, if we require a particular form to be filled out, that could be a burden for some families, whether it be online for people that might not have access, or in paper for people who that would be problematic for. I do think in some cases the verbal request is appropriate. I think most cases it would end up just being a written email type of thing, but I think there's some benefit to having some flexibility. I do think that including something on the curriculum website like Tanya suggested, and we are working on the curriculum transparency website, I think that would fit in well there. We'll do whatever the board wants. I'd be a little cautious about getting too prescriptive with it.
I think if we can clean up the language in those 2 sentences, because it seems very contradicting, where maybe addressed in a timely manner to the classroom teacher and/or building administrator. And then the very next sentence, it'll say, all such requests will be considered at the discretion of the school district. If I give it to my teacher, how's it going to get to the school district? Who's the school district? Who's really making the decision? It just seemed...
I think what that's saying there, Tanya, is that the first one is saying who it needs to go to, but then I think the second sentence is saying that, yes, we'll take a request, but the district reserves 100% of the right to determine whether or not that request is going to be met or approved. I mean, I'm sure there's some subjects a lot of subjects that an alternative learning assignment would be appropriate, but I mean, there's certain standards and certain things that we teach that would not qualify for an opt-out. And I know when this language was talked about years ago, I think it was math we were talking about. There could be a certain algebra assignment or a certain topic, and I'm sure that some kids would love to opt out of differential equations or whatever. Well, Abe could probably talk about that, I can, but the point is that the district reserves the right to make that determination. Now, we do have policy 333, which talks about the ones where it really isn't, it's already a foregone conclusion of what's going to be approved and what's not in regards to human growth and development and such.
All right, so it is being considered to put it someplace at least more handy for families to find.
And clean up the handbook language.
Okay.
Is there more that you want?
Go ahead, Carl.
My question is, and maybe this was mentioned and I didn't hear it in the last meeting or this one, but do we keep statistics on how many opt-outs there are a year in the district? Or is it looser than that, where if a teacher can accommodate, they're just going to accommodate, and we don't realize that there's been 200 requests to opt out, or and could this process help inform better knowledge of that? Right? If the form's filled out through the parent, that's great. If a teacher or an administrator gets a request, do they do a really super quick form, and then how many of these are happening, what classes they are, so we can make decisions, better informed decisions.
Collect data? Yeah, it's a handful. I mean, it's not hundreds. We're talking a handful. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to collect data on it.
Okay, do we want to bring that back to the next meeting then?
A report?
Talk about possible changes. Charlie.
Essentially, aren't we asking the authors of the handbook to clean up the language and get things more together and bring that back when they bring the handbooks back?
I think that's the biggest part. I mean, there's a few other pieces with the curriculum transparency website, with how we're going to handle the data management. So I will follow up with communication. I think this is something that could be communicated through a weekly update, potentially.
Okay.
Kind of a status report, and then you can expect to see it in the handbooks for 22, 23. Okay?
Sound good, Tanya?
Chris, is that acceptable to you?
I agree with you 100%.
Which is typically the way things work.
Jeez. Okay, move on to item J, review policy 361, educational material selection and evaluation. Tanya.
Surprise! So in our conversations, you shared, Joe, or I think Brian might have even said it on Valentine's, this 361. So this one was super interesting to me, because and Amy, maybe you can help me out since you're the most weathered board member, the reconsideration committee. Are you familiar with the reconsideration committee?
Not that I've ever.
So I think this might be one that we want to revisit maybe, or revise, because I don't know if we have a reconsideration committee, do we?
We do.
We do?
We have not had to use it, but we do. And actually, Brian has been working feverishly to get it all updated. But yes, we do have a standing committee ready to go in the event that we do have a challenge.
Okay. All right, so is it a secret group, or like, do we know? Do they rotate every year? Do you guys keep
Brian, why don't you speak to it for a minute, Brian? It's not a secret.
It's not a secret. I don't have the list right in front of me right now. I can pull it up or share it as part of an update. But as listed out in the policy, it's a standing committee that the participants are listed out who is in that committee. So we do have a central office administrator. I am the central office administrator that serves on the committee. One building principal, and then a secondary and an elementary staff member, and then 4 members of our community. In the event that we do have to meet, they are ready to meet, review what the concern is, and take their vote and make their determination. As far as the frequency that we should be reviewing and recommitting those individuals is something we should be doing on an annual basis. We've been fortunate that we haven't had a lot of concerns come forward in the 11 years that I've been in the district. While we have had questions that have come up and requests for students to not, read a particular book, whether it's part of a class or, something that's in the library, when it's gone through the process up to now, we've been able to accommodate that concern without the committee needing to meet. Sometimes there's a substitution as far as the resource that's being used for the class or an accommodation that's being made.
Because then if I read this right, the board, we delegate this to them to do, so they do it on our behalf.
Yep, and as stated in the policy, if they're not happy with that, they do have the ability to appeal it to the board and for the board to make the final decision. So it does say that the decision is final, but they can.
I was never familiar. Okay, so then along the same line, sorry, hold on 1 second. So that helps. The form that is with this one. Has this been updated since we have turned to a one-to-one site? Because we've included books and magazines and pamphlets, but there's no reference to websites, or there's no. So I don't. Did you see it, microfiche? Yeah. No. So I just didn't know, because again, this one was, like you said, you didn't really have to. 2002, I think was this one. So
I'll say the short answer is the time I've been here, we've never updated it.
Okay.
So would the board like administration to work on this, or does the board want to work on this? We're happy to do our job and work on it.
It's super low priority, but maybe going into the new year, we need to start I don't know, somebody should volunteer to I don't know since I lived through this, but
spring cleaning,
dig out some of these policies that are what is even going on here?
But specific to this one, would you like us to review it and bring the board some
I think
ideas?
so, absolutely. If we're referencing them recently in conversation, then I think we should have them reviewed and updated, or at least confirmed
Is there
that that's correct.
Anybody else would rather do it themselves?
Yeah, I like it. And that form is excellent. It is so, they ask exactly the right questions to make somebody actually have to know why they're critiquing the problem, which could be like, we could have someone who comes up and says, I don't like this sentence, I think it is, you know, immoral. But they have to go through the process. Have you read the entire text? In what context are you saying that? How could this be used in it? It's really well done. So the only thing you have to do is just move out the microfiche. But everything else is cool, including Brian's Committee 1.
Very good,
Then
okay.
just doing that update will also give you a more recent date, so then it looks like we're actually reviewing these.
Okay, so we'll update and bring it back for the next meeting.
Very good.
Was there content concerns you had, Tanya?
No,
It didn't sound like,
no.
I mean, outside the
No.
form, but,
Nope.
okay.
Okay,
I have one last one. How often do you utilize this committee? I mean, how often?
Never.
Yeah.
I didn't know it existed.
8 years, I've never had it here.
In the 11 years, I'm in my 11th year in the district, and we have never met.
How do we join the secret society?
I can't tell you. Okay, moving on, item K, discuss school board retreat. We were very fortunate to get Executive Director of WASB, John Ashley, to come.
Wait a minute. I thought, did we discuss policy, oh yeah, the educational materials? But also, didn't you mention something about you wanted to know who the professionally trained personnel are?
Yes, he did.
You probably couldn't hear Brian very well. He did talk about the committee a little bit.
Oh, the committee,
Yeah.
yeah, but I was just thinking that, I just had a comment on that. I looked at that and I came up with an idea. DPI licensed educator or administrator to supervise studies in curriculum and instruction and content areas are general elementary or secondary curriculum, but I guess that pretty much, the instruction to include director of curriculum, so that, I guess that does that. Okay, sorry.
But Amy, if you do have a suggestion for some language changes, any board members, if you have suggestions, shoot them to me by, what's a fair date, end of this week. Not Friday, we're gonna be at the girls' basketball state tournament. By the end of the day, Thursday, if you have any terminology suggestions for any of these, policy 850, the opt-out language, or this last one, 361, email them by the end of the week and we'll try to include them in our suggestions.
Don't forget to change the date.
You have the updated date on the bottom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. I'll make a note of that.
Item K, school board retreat. So as I said, we're very fortunate to get WASB Executive Director John Ashley to come. Scheduled for June 6th. Chris or I or Clint will not be here.
All of the above.
So this is scheduled for June 6th at 6 o'clock p.m. So, and talk about board, how board functions and things like that. It'll be very good. Any questions on that?
So is that after a meeting or instead of?
Instead of,
It's a separate deal all on its own.
I just wanted to add, there was an email from WASB too, because I know that it was discussed because we do have so many new board members, 3 coming on, and then really the 3 of us are new. In April, on, April 21st, they're having a new board orientation or new school board member gathering at the Menomonie Middle School. So people can attend that according to this?
yes.
Those are good, those are good.
With all the new board members we've had in the last 2 years, we schedule it here at the middle school.
They didn't have one last year, did they?
Last year they had an online one, a virtual one, but it was very poorly attended. So I would encourage newer board members to attend.
So mark your calendars for the 21st from 7 to 9.
I'm sure you'll get a bunch of emails on it too.
Item L, items related to next meeting dates, board committees and reports. I did get a thing from Jody Pillman's School Board Candidate Forum, Monday, March 21st from 7 to 9 p.m. at the high school auditorium. All 6 school board candidates have been invited, and Clint Moses is the moderator.
Can I didn't know I had a chance to talk on this one, actually. I am actually, and I reached out to a couple people, I'm looking for a co-moderator for it. So any of the candidates that have not yet confirmed that they're going, have a suggestion, feel free to contact me, because I want to make this a friendly, productive candidate forum. There will be no yelling, shouting, name calling, anything except maybe directed at me, but I do seriously want to make this a productive thing. I've reached out to a couple individuals that are checking with their schedule. As soon as I have those names and we can have kind of a bipartisan candidate forum, I am all about it. So the 21st from 7 till 9 o'clock, open to, in fact, we'll have questions ahead of time so that you'll be well prepared and no surprises.
Okay, and just to remind Amy.
I'd just like to, I'm guessing that Charlie, you were the one that was able to contact and get John Ashley to come. I just wanted to thank Charlie for doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Way to go.
Cold start.
Next, March 14th to the 18th is spring break. Again, no school this Friday because of the girls going to state. Our next meeting will be March 28th. With that, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Motion. Chris.
Second.
And Mark got the second in. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.